The way that this usually starts or surfaces is that a person or a couple comes in relationship crisis. Mm-hmm. And the way they describe the crisis to me usually is, first and foremost, I caught my partner cheating in some way. So living some kind of double life. They've caught them spending hours and hours on pornography, or they found out about an affair or multiple affairs. And so those will be the descriptors about why we're in crisis. Yeah. Right. And most therapists can kind of meet them at that moment and say, okay, you're in a marital crisis, but things just don't feel right. Why do I walk out of couple sessions and I feel like I'm to blame when I just caught my partner lying and sneaking around, but then now I'm being shamed for like not having sex with him or her enough, or that I nag too much, and that feels so unright to me, like we're not fixing the problem. I walk in and we're in a crisis issue because my partner has been doing nefarious lying, sneaking around behaviors, and then suddenly we're talking about marital problems. This isn't a marital issue. Exactly. My partner made choices to go outside the marriage and live this double life.
When your relationship gets blown apart by any type of cheating, no relationship advice will help you. The only way you can save your relationship is when you stop trying to save your relationship. And any attempt to repair your relationship might be the thing that brings it to an end. That might not seem to make sense, but here is what you need to know. An addiction is not a marital problem. The mention of addiction might be confusing, but what this means is that your bickering, your fights, even intimacy problems in your relationship have absolutely nothing to do with your partner's severe problems. Stick with us. This is the most important episode of Marriage Health we've ever filmed, because Kristen Snowden is one of the best experts in the world on helping couples understand this one idea that changes everything.
Substance use that you didn't realize was so bad, pornography use, lying and sneaking around about money and women or men or affairs or other types of secret behaviors. That is not a marital issue.
Yeah, right. That's right.
That is a person making poor choices and using poor coping skills issue that has to be talked about. And then, later, like marital issues come in. A lot of people miss that.
This all comes down to one really hard question. Is this my fault? If you are the type of person who always takes responsibility, this might be hard for you to believe, but the answer is no. So no, your arguments, not having enough sex, your issues in your marriage don't have a single thing to do with their serious problems, their addiction. And if you're meeting with a counselor, a therapist, a coach, a pastor, or close friend that is blurring the lines between your marital issues and your partner's problems, they probably mean well, but they're not going to help you.
A person or a couple will come in because they're feeling like it's a relationship crisis, and they've been told when there's an affair, when there's lying, sneaking around behavior, and you're questioning, who is this person that I married? I'm not even sure who this person is because I don't recognize these behaviors and choices. We've all been instructed to go to marriage counseling.
Right.
And I feel like the run-of-the-mill marriage counseling may, not always, miss the really paramount, very important moment where they assess, is this truly like a dark seasonal marital problem? Or is this a total other addiction issue? Which, it's they act out when things are great. They act out when things are bad. They act out with an extreme amount of gaslighting. They make a lot of promises that they're going to get better. They're doing these elaborate behaviors to continue to hide their outside behaviors. That's a whole world that most professionals and only those people who are trained in this particular type of field know how to ask those kind of questions.
The day and age that we live with, there's so much access, pornographic material to talk to other people online, converse without other people knowing. And some people go, oh, no. I'm doing this on the side. How's my spouse going to know that? They do. In any relationship, truth is the foundation of that. And so if that truth is being eroded to any degree, you are feeling that as the partner in the scenario, experiencing this lack of truth. Like, am I going crazy because I'm constantly thinking about, wait a second, that didn't sort of line up? Or I walk into my house, there's tension there. When I ask my spouse about things, there's anger or frustration, or there's sort of projection back on me that I'm crazy. There might even be some gaslighting going on. All of that starts to make me feel like I'm living in this gigantic fog. It can feel as if I'm in this gigantic emotional warfare.
A lot of couples come to us and they think they have the answer to their problems. And people want to find out. So they go and investigate. Hey, you know what? Work got in between us. I didn't feel loved, or I felt devalued, or this or that. That's good on the surface level. But most people don't have a clue of the origin. What started this whole thing? Where did this begin?
What started this and where did it begin? Answering those questions might be impossible unless you have help. These are the Crafts, James and Teri. They don't know how the internet works, anything about YouTube, TikTok, or social media, and that's okay because they know a bit about something else: marriage. In fact, they've helped some of the most influential couples in the world, and they've also helped couples going through the hardest situations imaginable. The reason why James and Teri are able to help couples go through really hard things is because they've been through it themselves, and they came through the other side. Marriage Health with James and Teri Craft, featuring Kristen Snowden.
Can you remember the first time somebody looked at you and said you were an addict?
Good question. Yes. I was told by my counselor, therapist at the time, and he said it straight up with me. James, you are an addict and you're broken. And it devastated me. Especially coming from a home where I had a parent, one of my parents was an addict and had to go to rehab a couple times. And I never wanted to be associated with that.
You start asking the harder questions and kind of digging through the BS and the manipulation.
That's right.
And what you're really trying to do is assess, is this what I call like a seasonal moment of a dark place and space in this person's life and the marriage that has brought on this substance abuse or infidelity? Or is this part of a bigger addiction problem pattern, behavioral pattern that's going on?
Yeah.
And that's a huge thing that I find only people who specialize in what we specialize tend to do that.
Yeah. The situation when someone has more than one thing going on, we call it like a comorbid. We call that a comorbid or okay, I gotta be able to say this right. Comorbidity, meaning there's like more than one thing going on at the same time. And what's really good about having that professional in your experiences is that that's what we're looking for, right? Where when you're sitting in your seat, you're thinking there's been lying and deception, and maybe there's some procrastination going on. This person keeps forgetting their priorities and it's impacting me. There's this sort of anger cycle that's happening, isolation, a lot of these things that are just happening, but I'm not able to put all the pieces together. And someone on this side of the seat is going, that sounds like more than one thing that is going on. Definitely sounds repetitive, but let's get into why we're doing the things like forgetting priorities. Why are we feeling like we need to hide? Why is there shame wrapped around decisions? Is there lying and deception? Is there a reason behind that? That's when we start to see, wait a second, this and this are related, meaning there's an underlying issue that's causing some of these outward symptoms that are happening in the relationship. And you come to my office and you're like, this is a problem. This is the symptom I'm seeing. Somebody who has a professional background, you start to dissect it and realize, there's more than one thing happening here.
If there's an addiction issue, they're not dealing with the real issue. They're just changing behavior at that time so that their marriage is better.
Right.
Rather than the person getting better. That's the big challenge. People hate the term addiction being labeled onto them. because there is a persona of addiction. I'm not an addict. I'm not an addict. That's a denial structure that people live in. I'm not an addict. I don't do it that bad. I'm in control. It's my wife. It's the gaslighting that goes forward,
Right.
and so
she made me do it. She made me do it. I mean, that's the thing. That's one of the huge constructs to continuing to act out in this addictive type pattern. Is while I'm in this marital unit, and unfortunately, a couple's marriage environment can continue this blaming narrative, which is it's the marriage that's making me go out and do these nefarious behaviors, which can be so much more damaging
100%.
in the healing process or counterproductive to it.
Yeah, for sure.
And also, let's say the other thing about addiction or being labeled an addict as we're trying to work towards recovery and healing is that you learn, if you've been labeled as an addict, the very basic concept is no longer can I trust my best thinking.
That's right.
Right.
I have to therefore lean into this entire recovery construct that I have avoided doing my entire life.
Yeah.
Most of my career, I've worked in high-end treatment centers in the Malibu area.
Yeah.
So 90% of my clientele have been Fortune 500 CEOs, people very high up in various industries. So not just one particular industry. Yeah. And they all on the outside appear to be very high functioning.
Right.
And so, I guess I'm just kind of never fooled by the exterior of, what they're wearing, how well they exert themselves.
For sure.
Because honestly, a lot of them have just been well trained from childhood.
That's right.
Again, like I said, to have this incredible skill to lie and manipulate and do everything you can to maintain your external optics.
That's right.
And on the outside, you just look a certain way to everybody else. And hey, you're winning. All of a sudden, you run into a therapist like us who rips the Band-Aid off and says, I'm on to you. And this sounds actually pretty awful. Yeah. And their fragile egos don't know what to do with it.
And if you just pause for a second and we empathize with that and we turn our gaze to the partner, that is excruciating. That's an excruciating experience to walk in a relationship when at first when it's not even defined and it feels like I'm walking in the dark and I'm in a dark room with, zero light, and trying to figure out why in the world I feel the impact of the intimacy disorder. And just as you said, we are all looking for connection.
That's right.
We're all looking for that attachment, that place where we feel safe. And if I'm in a dark room with that longing and yet never reach and I'm not ever able to connect with that with the person that I'm committed to, feels as if I'm slowly dying.
Yeah, but very intangible because it's that classic frog boiling in the pot because no one teaches these kind of things in class. No one teaches you this kind of subconscious, why do I have a sense of no value and worth? Yeah. And you're maybe not able because your partner maybe never came home and said, wow, you're useless or you're pathetic. Yeah. But they might come home every day in their own disgruntled, avoidant behavior where they have to kind of pull up a wall of criticism in order to keep the distance between you and them because for an avoidant type person who wants to act outside their relationship, they want to, like, being too close to you is like smothering and overwhelming to them. So they might not come home and say, you're valueless, I don't want to touch you. But they would definitely come home and kind of make a face and be like, God, the kitchen is a mess. You were home all day. Yeah. Is this all you could do? Yeah. And what those kind of moments do is they just start eating away at your soul. Yeah. And it starts kind of plucking away at like, oh my God, am I bad? Yeah. I mean, I know I have 3 kids, but I guess the house is a mess. And I am home all day. And so God, I am failing. And then you multiply that by several incidences and an inability to talk through this stuff. and you just know something's wrong and something's not okay, but you can't put your finger on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, when I work with women in workshops, small groups, or if I'm speaking at conferences, church events, whatever it might be, and I start to talk to a larger number of women together, you start to have these moments where people will start to say, hey, that's how I feel. Hey, you know what? I'm experiencing that symptom where it might be my body feels like it's falling apart. I'm not sleeping well. I feel like I'm isolating in my relationships because I just don't even know what's right and true and real anymore. And I'm starting to have this really intense personal impact by what I can't quite describe, but the impact that it's having on you is intense. When you're feeling those things, I want to encourage you, don't just push it aside or say, yeah, you know what, it's just something I have to deal with, or I'm just, that's just me being me. I'm crazy. I've never been able to pull it together. Yeah, you may have some issues that you're dealing with, but a lot of this brain fog, emotional disconnect, the feeling of something's off, my physical body's being impacted, I'm having stomach issues, I'm just feeling this vigilance. We don't just shove those things aside, because if you're experiencing that, there could be something that's going on in the relationship that hasn't yet been either diagnosed or dealt with. I
am not like the fun dating sex police. That is not my role as your therapist. But I always encourage clients to put really big decisions through two big questions I kind of learned. Is I first always say, look, when you're trying to figure out what's okay, or is this person healthy for me or not, or is this behavior healthy or not? I always ask, do you have to lie or sneak around or manipulate anybody or anything in order to maintain this behavior?
Good.
And then the next question is, and ultimately, is this behavior or engaging with this person, is it aligned with your values and goals?
That's good.
Wow.
That's really good.
Does this all, and those two questions kind of, I don't need to be the fun police and tell you what's okay and not okay.
Yeah.
I just need you to start figuring that out. Now, of course, a lot of addicts have been very well, and not just addicts, but people who have cheated or done other things that they're not proud of outside their relationship. The way they've kind of weaseled out of that is they don't have values and goals.
Yeah.
Right.
They might assert them, but not really stand on them.
Yeah.
And so one of the big steps is to say, what do you want to do?
Yeah.
We create these things called circle plans, which are like sobriety plans. And one of the important things we do is state, what are your goals?
Yeah.
Do you want to continue to harm your partner?
Yeah.
That's a really big one.
Yep.
Yes or no? Is your goal to continue to harm people around you in your life? Yes or no? Because they at that point might not love themselves enough to care about hurting themselves.
Right.
But they usually care whether or not they're hurting a loved one. Well, are we making choices and behaviors around one of those stated goals? Because I have a feeling this is going to hurt your wife or your husband. And
I love that.
Becomes a really good navigation
That's
tool.
right. Yeah, it's good.
I love that too, because I can remember when we were sitting and it was literally like, D-Day had happened like 2 weeks prior. And of course, my life is shattered. He's completely just demolished. He couldn't even stand upright. The shame was so just on top of him. And I remember sitting, with our counselor at the time, Dr. Ted Roberts, and he had said to James, and he had known James from some time previous, and he knew that James was kind of the Boy Scout in every other area of his life than the area that the addiction and the deception was sort of hovering around. And he said, James, I want to encourage you. You are a man of character. And he stopped him. James stopped him and he says, I am not a man of character. And Ted says, I'm sorry, but you're not going to tell me what I believe. And he just pushed right back at James and he said, you are a man of character. You're not living like a man of character. And the mask that you've been wearing. And he went into that and he just talked about the choices that James had made that basically had taken him away from the character choices that he ultimately had chosen for his life, But he'd forgotten that in the sort of the depravity that he had been living in, and the shame, and the place where he felt like he was hopeless and helpless in his own life. And it was like he stuck his finger right in James's chest and was like, "You are." And James was like, he just started bawling. And I remember just sitting there going, like, I couldn't believe what I was watching. And he was like, it was like every part of that facade had just started to fall away. And it was like, there he is.
Yeah.
But he was broken. And it was like, that's when things really started to change. But it was really good for me as the partner. Of course, I wasn't like, oh, I'm healed now. You know, I mean, it was like
Still want to kill the guy.
months and months and months and months that, you know, I mean,
That was beginning to commence to start
I was
something.
kind of like, oh, maybe not today, you know, but no, but it was like in that moment, I realized like, there's the human, there's the man that I love there. Yes, I know that he believes that, but he forgot his values.
That's right. When someone is in an addictive lifestyle, it takes away their ability to live according to their own standards. See, my life was a great example of that. I was a pastor, and I had a large church, and I vowed to speak the truth and live by the truth. Now, that might hurt some of you when I say that, because you've been lied to by spiritual leaders in your life. And I first want to stand in proxy of those spiritual leaders that have hurt you, that have lied to you, that have misled you. And I want to say sorry, because it was wrong, it was destructive, and it really hurt you. And it might have derailed you, and it might have turned you away from people, God, and it hardened your heart. And so I just want to say sorry for that. And I deeply mean that, because I don't know, maybe you have ever received an apology or repentance from spiritual leaders who have done wrong and have lied. Well, I think there's important to say, you know, I wasn't born a bad guy. You know, some horrible things that I was developed, how to learn how to mechanisms.
No, you're not a sociopath, a narcissist that can never, ever change.
Yeah.
I know, but how often were you given that label in that
100%.
path? And how destructive is that healing path when you're given those labels?
People actually, and these are from every aspect of life, you know, spiritual leaders, friends, they bolted because they said this: he will never change. He will never change. Now, there's some people who don't change, and I'm just going to be frank with you, because there's some people who just don't make the turn, you know, because they refuse to deal with the pain and work through it. You know, they will avoid it at all costs because that's their whole life, and so on and so forth. But I believe, and I have hope that most people, you face this and you do it with, and I tell people all this all the time, you can't do it alone. Don't try. That narrative will not work. It hasn't worked for you all these years. Don't keep trying to do the same thing. But if you do it with people, you can work through that, and you can become that different person that you long. It's going to cost you everything you have. It's going to require so much out of you. You know, I was talking to a pastor that I've been working with for years, and he sent me somebody on his staff. And he said, hey, you're going to work with James, same thing, same situation. He goes, and it's going to be the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. And I don't play around with it anymore. I'm like, yeah, it is. But is it worth it? Is it a value of yours? You know, is health a value? You know, is care in a relationship a value? You know, and people have to...
is not being alone.
Not being alone.
Honesty.
Yeah.
Honesty is value.
Is so hard.
Exactly.
There's most of our culture, I don't even think values honesty.
No, they don't. When I first started my healing process, I took a test. It's called the SAS test, sexual addiction. It's a survey that you do, test that you work through. I remember when I took it, they said, if you have numbers between 1 and 6, you're good. You're not really an addict. But 7 and above, you're an addict and you need to get help, pretty much. And that's what it was. And I was a 7. And I started to justify myself like, I'm not that bad. I'm a 7. I'm right there by 6. I started to justify in my mind, maybe you're not as bad as you think you are. I started my healing process, and my therapist, what he did, he said, hey, 3 months into my process, he goes, I'd like for you to take that test one more time. And so I did. I took it again, and I got a 16. I say that out loud because that's where I was. I said, what in the world? What happened? I mean, why am I getting worried? Am I getting worse? And he goes, no, you're getting honest. You're getting honest about yourself. Before you were lived in denial. Now you're living in honesty. And it created an atmosphere for me to grow and learn from a base of honesty about myself. You know, and I remember when that shell cracked on me, I get emotional when I say it, but it was like, aha moment. Like, that's how you see me? You know, when I didn't see myself that way. And I was like, there's a hope here that I couldn't comprehend that at first.
Yeah.
You know, and there was a newness that I'm like, I want that. I want that.
I ran a men's drug and sex addiction program, you know, and they said, look, one of the core beliefs of these male addicts are, if anyone really knew me, really knew the stuff I've done, the things I've said, the whole second life or double, triple life that I've led, they would not love me.
Yeah.
If your wife had an adoring moment and was like, oh, you're such a great husband, or you're such a great dad, or every award you got would just be stunted by the story of, well, if you really knew me.
100%.
If you really knew what happened.
Yeah. That's tragic.
Yeah.
No, you would not. You would not be giving me this award. You would not be telling me that kind thing. And addiction is a huge wall to human connection.
That's right. It's huge.
It's not just an intimacy disorder. No. It is a giant blocking wall to feeling human exchange, to accepting love, to giving love, having connective, real moments.
So if I'm in a relationship with somebody who is, you know, dealing with addiction, and let's say it hasn't been accepted, or it hasn't been, you know, diagnosed or worked through or anything like that, and as the partner, you know, we start to feel like we're not enough. We'll never measure up. I know when we sit with couples, we'll often start, you know, working through some of that communication. And it's like, we can see the impact on your partner. Like, your partner over here is like, you know, anorexic in terms, like, you know, emotionally, is neglected, is starting to say things that we can tell are actually coming from you. And yet, you know, you're sitting there acting like you don't have really any awareness or a responsibility around it. It's like, So we start digging more into that because we can see just sort of the shell of what, you know, that projection is starting to do.
If I'm sitting with a couple or a person who's reporting some kind of relationship crisis due to some form of betrayal, some acting out behavior, I'll actually generally run it through the way that the DSM defines addiction. And that's pretty straightforward. Was there ever, through either their partner reporting this or them personally reporting this, a promise or an attempt to stop this particular behavior? Oh, I swear I won't spend this money. Okay, I'll cut down on my drinking. Okay, I won't view porn anymore. I'll let you know if I do. Or I'll stop talking to that woman or man at work. Was there ever an attempt to stop and then a failure to follow through? Or usually what it is there's a chronic pattern of that. Chronic pattern of a lot of promises made and an inability to follow through. That's a sign of addiction. Another issue is that social problems, relational problems continue to come up where these type of outside behaviors are at the core of the problem. They're spending too much time doing it. So the working or the drinking or the acting out or the secrecy around it. And it's causing social problems at work, at home, with their loved ones. You know, even when their addict partners are present, they're reporting they're just not present. Or there's so much emotional, kind of like what Teri was just talking about, this emotional dysregulation that is going on because of stuff that's happening outside the marriage, outside the relationship, but they're bringing it into the home. And they're like, okay, I'm not really sure why he's so upset today, but we need to adjust the entire house system around the fact that he's really upset today because I don't know how to manage this guy's feelings. I just know that something's pissed him off. I have a family going on and I'm running it at my home. And that's what we call like the fawning response, where I kind of have to fawn and keep peace just to kind of keep the household moving because the addict is in their dysregulated state from all the stuff that I don't know about that's going on outside the home. So that's something, the social problems that go on. Usually the acting out, the addict partner doesn't admit to this, but I'll ask questions around risky use. You know, are they watching the pornography type that is illegal?
Yeah.
Because remember, you usually have to use more, ingest more, engage in more intense behaviors in order to get the high that you used to get. And so maybe instead of just an affair, they're doing paid sex. Instead of vanilla porn, they're watching more controversial, sometimes illegal pornography. Instead of, you know, just drinking beers, they're now drinking vodka. And so we ask about that kind of behavior. Is there a progressive increase in use? And also, is there just generally lost time because of their acting out behaviors? And so those are kind of the questions, the assessment really I ask either, again, an addict person or a coupleship when we're assessing the severity of the problem.
That's good.
When someone, you know, can't stop when they want, doesn't stop when they know they should, you know, does it even though they're hurting themselves and other people, it has starting to have the impact in their professional, personal, and, you know, their interpersonal life. So that's where it's like, okay, like, so we all have this kind of playing field, and some of us are going to have, you know, those issues within our marital relationship. But then there's this other level where it's okay, you know, there's something more here. That's what this is all about, is what we're talking about here, is what you just said. There are run-of-the-mill couples issues that I could list them because I see them all day long. I see them just friends having basic issues. I see it all day from just having kids and like run-of-the-mill issues that all couples run into. You're so right, Terry. And then there's a little more off the charts. And that this is no longer a you and me issue. It is me having uncomfortable experiences within this relationship of you and me, and maybe uncomfortable stuff going on in the workplace or in my friends or in my just lack of understanding of my own body and lack of purpose and values and all that kind of stuff. And then I turn around and I make all these really, really poor choices about how to manage all that discomfort. And then I do it to the level of breaking laws, harming everyone around me, harming myself, destroying everything I've built in my life. So despite consequences and everything, that is what we're talking about. That is addiction. It's a different level. And there's an entire different recovery. That's the other thing I want 100%. Everyone to know. As soon as you find out that there is a chronic pattern of acting out, something that's progressive, that couple session is not fixing it. It is time to explore the addiction model for recovery.
That's great. That's great.
Absolutely.
You know, addiction is not about you choosing to do what's wrong. It's about you losing the power to choose to do what is right. When your partner says to you, I promise I will change. I'll become the person you hope for. I'm never going to do it again. And they white knuckle it. They don't have support. They don't invite anybody else into the process. And they try to do it the best they can. They will fail. They won't make it. I don't think I've ever met anybody in my life that has come to me or I have seen that has tried to do this on their own and successfully has walked through it and has kicked it and said, hey, I'm done.
Now, listen, if somebody has a repetitive behavior pattern all the way up through an addiction, it doesn't just go away. It doesn't just go away. It has to be worked through. There has to be a support system. There has to be a commitment and a system that somebody kind of works through. And there has to be an understanding of the sort of the why behind the what is happening. And if none of that has taken place, there may be like I'm keeping the lid on for a number of months or even, an extended period of time. I'm keeping the lid on and this isn't happening anymore. But if it's not fully processed, it will eventually come back in one way or the other. So that's why it's so important to validate your feelings, validate your experience, and then advocate, for getting help for you and for you as a couple.
The classic question is always for a betrayed partner. First of all, they're always like, should I stay? Should I go? That's the ultimate one. Is this person moving towards healing and recovery, or are we going to be stuck in this cycle forever? And how do I know once they get recovery if they're not just going to turn around and go back to the lying, cheating, sneaking around behaviors? Those are the ultimate huge questions that I get asked all the time. And my first response is, this is the wiliness of loving and living with and sharing your life with other flawed human beings, which is there is no guarantee. There's no guarantee that your partner is not going to go outside tomorrow, get hit by a bus and not come home.
That's right. Or
if you're going to find out they relapse on their substances or their sexual acting out behavior and your life is in shambles again. So it is a careful recovery or healing or re-inviting stability back to your life is a careful balance between you doing your own personal work to what I call is like developing your own rooting system to make sure that you are well rooted in your own individual tree of life. Let's take that metaphor and run with it.
Love it.
Because you know that you want to set up roots and share your life with this other person, but they have their own recovery process and you don't know what they're going to do. So you have to make sure you're going to be strong and can withhold the storms of the potential future. And that rooting system for a betrayed partner is to make sure they have the support system. Me, I'm a huge group fan, group work fan. I know you guys are too, because that is where the magic happens and it's so needed for these type of traumas and experiences. And so I encourage betrayed partners groups to be around a bunch of people who have suffered and struggled in the same way, so I can speak openly about these tragedies and struggles. Then I also have my other non-betrayed partner friends and family, having your kids or your religion or your spiritual practice, your hobbies, your things that you're passionate about, your work and things that are self-esteem and value building. Having those all rooted can really help you stay strong, whether or not your partner gets recovery.
That's right.
I'm all about having the plan B and C because life is vulnerable and people are vulnerable. We just don't know what they're doing.
That's right.
Then as far as looking over to your addict partner for signs, and I have whole videos that are about this, signs that your partner is changing for the better. The two big things I always look for are the big words, humbleness and surrender.
That's right.
That comes with so many more descriptions and so many more, lists of things that I look for. But there's this idea that I have fully put on the blanket of step one that, wow, this behavior and these patterns of behavior that I would engage in was madness. Like, remember, when I'm doing the behavior, I'm not walking around like doing the behavior saying, wow, I'm really crazy. I've fallen off the crazy wagon when I'm doing all I know is I'm doing it and it's working, it's so far it's working and I'm going to do everything I can to hold on to these unhealthy coping skills and these addict behaviors. Cause at that time it's working. It's crazy, but it's working. And so no one, it's really a huge step towards humbleness and surrender to write it down. When we have a process, we do these 25, even though I have this value, even though I love my wife, I've had 6 affairs, even when she caught me on the first time and I swore that I would never do it again, I had another one, and even just very descriptive things, even though I don't want to get an STD, I would continue to have unprotected sex with, plethora of people. But so you just get into your level of really owning the insanity behind all these behaviors. And that's usually done separate, not in couples therapy, with your recovery community, with a group of people who've suffered and struggled in the same way. So they're more open and willing to admit the insanity of their behavior. And then the surrender piece comes in where it's like, I know there's this default setting in me that's going to always want to go back to these insanity behaviors. I just know it.
Yeah.
And so I have to have a couple people on speed dial.
Yeah.
And that's what I've always appreciated about you, James, is you've always, with all your clients,
That's right.
you've always made yourself so accessible, because that's such a key recovery piece, is that there's got to be somebody on speed dial that you can contact. 2 or 3 is even better. Where they need to be my little Jiminy Cricket, my little prefrontal cortex.
That's right.
Yeah.
Because my best thinking is going to get me back over there again. And I don't want to go over there.
That's right.
I want to put a little bit more time, a little bit more pause, make the next right decision.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
That's really good.
And it's just a slow pattern of rebuilding and rewiring a new circuitry system.
Well, that part
So
there,
good.
you know,
So
Kristen,
good.
is for every person who's an addict, they have to break that cycle of I've been alone or isolated. You can't do it that way. If you find yourself here and you're listening to this video and watching it, and you are that person or your spouse is that person. When I say when your spouse is that person, that means it's you too, because you've been drugged through each one of those cycles that your spouses walk through addictive cycles. I want to invite you, please reach out. Our heart bleeds to see you free and healthy, but you can't do this on your own.
Yeah, anybody who tries to DIY an addiction journey, I'm just going to say right now, don't do it. It won't work. You have to have a systematic approach. You have to have a commitment. You need to have professionals. And, you know, I know that James and I would say that from our heart of hearts, you know, it was our connection to God and walking through a process of knowing that we are loved and there's grace, and that ultimately that we had a power that was beyond ourselves that made all the difference.
All we have to do is stop and allow ourselves help, and to be able to navigate the healing work ahead of you. It will transform your life if you allow others to come in and help you through those next steps. Reach out to us, go to our website, click the link and put in a query. It goes straight to us and we'll reach out to you right away so that we can get you on that journey of healing with somebody, not alone. I hope to hear from you guys.
Marriage Health with James and Teri Craft. If you feel like you need someone to come alongside you, a coach or a counselor, reach out to us. The link is in the description.